Hi everybody, Hannah here. I am proud to present my observation and environment project on what does fall smell like. So let's dive in. When I first began focusing on this project, I knew I wanted to bring more nature-based materials into my science center and capture the curiosity and inquiry that my children engage with outdoors and bring it right inside our classroom. So, my goal was to infuse the essence of fall into our classroom and explore how children would engage with the different smells to enhance the understanding of the world around them. To be honest, I wasn't sure where this project would lead us at first, but the imagination and wonder of my 2 year olds and what they bring into the classroom every day amazes me. So, there wasn't a doubt in my mind that it would bring so much joy and into their lives and into our environment. And I just love seeing the world from their perspective. So this brings me to my next key aspect of my approach. I wanted to make this project as child-led as possible, and because most of our curriculum at my center is pre-planned, so I saw this as an opportunity to resist the urge to control where the activities start and end and truly capture the essence of seeing the world through a 2 year old's eyes. As this project began to unfold, I was quick to notice how smell is strongly connected to memories, even in children this young. This observation led to our guiding question of my project, which was how can certain smells trigger memories and help children make connections to their own lives? Our story begins on a brisk fall morning when all of the leaves from the neighboring trees made their way onto our playground. My children were beyond fascinated by the blanket of fall colors that covered our blue turf. One of the first instincts I observed was one of my children pressing a large leaf against her face and inhaling the leaf to truly immerse her senses into this new discovery. At this moment, I decided to take a step back and see how my other children responded to the findings of leaves on our playground. And I noticed different groups of children interacting with the leaves in different ways, such as throwing them in the air, rolling in the leaves, and then talking about where they had seen leaves before. Many children began talking about pumpkin patches and playing in leaves at their houses. Along with this observation of leaves, my children also showed a huge interest and curiosity into the chilly weather because it had caused us to wear our puffy jackets outside instead of our regular sweatshirts or no jacket that we were used to a couple weeks prior. So I decided that this would be an excellent opportunity for exploring the topic of fall and the different scents that it brings. As I brainstormed different questions to explore about fall, a few ideas came to mind. What does fall look like? What does fall feel like? Ultimately, I wanted to introduce the topic in a way that would engage my children's senses. Then I remembered how Harper was quick to inhale the scent of a leaf that she discovered on the ground. That moment inspired me to lead the project with the question, what does fall smell like? So, with investigating this question, it invites children to connect with their environment through their senses, especially smell. By focusing on the sensory experience, I could guide them in deeper exploration of the fall season, allowing them to relate their personal experiences in a meaningful way. This project fostered both sensory exploration and reflection, which are key elements in encouraging children to think more critically about the world around them. This guiding question also allowed space for the children to shape and direct the project and capture their moments of curiosity. We began with step one, exploring different fall related sensory materials to observe and document the children's initial reactions and the various smells, textures, and tastes of fall. Step two, I focused on uncovering the memories that children associated with these materials by creating a provocation station that reflected these experiences. Finally, my last step was to capture the powerful connection between smells, memory, and nature. I was inspired by the video we watched by children and nature, particularly the line, nature has the power to eliminate anxiety and stress in children. Based on my documentation of how the children engaged with the fall themed provocations, I became curious about how these sensory experiences might help alleviate their stress and encourage more thoughtful and intentional play later on. So like I had mentioned before, my main focus was to bring as much nature into our science center, into our own classroom as possible. So here's a photo of our science center before we added different materials to provoke curiosity, questions, and inquiry relating to fall, and that's on the left. In this step, I was inspired by the quote from Designs from Living and Learning. When we watch children closely, you will see their quest to connect to nature. So I really wanted to capture this quote in our classroom. So I quickly switched out the materials in the Science Center of our ordinary play materials to represent a fall provocation station that allowed for my children to interact and engage with the different textures, smells, sights, and even the tastes of fall. And that is on the right. Mmm.
Smell like apples.
It smells like apples?
Yeah. Daddy, please. Daddy. Daddy. Can I touch it with neither of those?
Yeah.
I want to. Whoa! That is so cool!
What do you see, Mila?
A pine cone. I see Can I touch it?
These are 2 videos from my first provocation I introduced in our Science Learning Center of my children interacting and making connections to their own senses relating to fall. The materials that I included were large pictures of autumn scenes. This included pictures of leaves turning vibrant colors, apple orchards, pumpkins, and gentle rain showers. And these were all displayed right above the science table. Among these materials, or among these pictures, was also magnifying glasses, safety glasses, pine cones, leaves, pumpkins, a scarf, and scented sticks that smelled like apples. And there was also a small pumpkin muffin nearby. And I loved seeing what materials drew what children to them and why they were so interested in these materials. In stage 3 is where the teacher story, my perspective, and the family story was represented the most in this project. After I had observed and documented the children engaging in the first provocation station with various smells and textures of fall, I noticed that they began to share stories of activities that these different smells had triggered. And that's where I captured our guiding question from, was during that activity. And I just love that it evolved from just like a fall theme to also memories and smell. And I think that was so inspiring because I didn't have that idea previously until my children were engaged in the provocation station. So my perspective in my story, I wanted to adjust the provocation station and make it more individualized to each child. So doing so, I also wanted to take the opportunity to include my parents in this next step that I was brainstorming. So I reached out to each of my parents on our Bright Wheel app. Unfortunately, I can't share those messages, but I requested photos of parents and their families and of my children participating in different fall activities from this year, and also asked them what their child's favorite part was in the photos that they'd shared. So the example that I'm sharing with you is from Caroline, and Caroline went to the pumpkin patch with her family, and her mom said that her favorite thing she loved the most was hay rides. So I individualized this provocation station to meet Caroline's story by placing pictures of her that her mom had given me of her at the pumpkin patch engaging with hay on the tractor rides, and then the materials were specific to that event. So I switched out all of the scents and replaced it with real hay and tractors and trailers that I had, and some plastic hay. And I wanted to see how children interacted with the center, if it was individualized to them based off of their own memory. In stage 4, we can see the child story, and this is specific to Caroline and her pumpkin patch memory. So after I made these new adjustments to the provocation station, I observed Caroline being taken back and realizing that the Science Center had been transformed to represent her and her own experiences at the pumpkin patch. She was almost confused at first as she spent several minutes just staring at the center and not interacting whatsoever. Um, and she just was observing and taking everything in. Um, and then after a few moments, she began her play by introducing me to who was all in the photos that I had put up and what they were doing. And after admiring her photos for a while, she began mimicking her experience with the hay at the farm and with the hay that was in front of her. So she described the texture and the memory that it brought back to her by describing it as pokey, and the hay poked her when she was on the tractor ride. And I loved witnessing this home connection in school, um, and just seeing how Caroline's play became more purposeful as she brought this outside connection into our classroom environment. In stage 5, I included the documentation that I captured, which are a few photos and videos of my children after engaging in our provocation station. Um, and you can see that their play becomes more purposeful. Before our provocation station, they kind of acknowledged the presence of leaves, and then they noticed that there was better things to do, like ride the tricycles or go down the slide. But yeah, here's just a few photos and a video I captured weeks after our provocation station. What does fall smell like? And my children would play with just the leaves the full time we were outside and just really engage themselves in nature. And like I said, that's not how our outside time looked before. And so I really liked documenting this step and just seeing how thoughtful and purposeful that they engaged with the leaves. So they rolled in the leaves, they made piles, they were comparing their leaves in what they smelled like and what they looked like. And they were also encouraging others to join in on the fun. And so that's in that last video.
Already, guys. Already, guys. Already.
In stage 5, we can see the learning and developing story, and that is by applying my children's discovered inquiry with the signs of winter. So, as our project was coming to an end, my children began showing their growing curiosity in the change of seasons with a new discovery: ice. So, while I thought we were shortly wrapping up our project as fall was coming to a close, I noticed I could continue this project and this inquiry as we get closer into the winter season, because my children started to make connections of how winter will had been changing our playground and our outside setting, all on their own. And I've just loved watching my children's observation and investigating skills evolve even in just a short amount of time. Problems and solutions. The only problems I ran into were very, very minor. And this being that the provocation station was more messy than what our science center was originally set up to be, with the crunchy leaves and the hay. They just kind of ended up everywhere. However, this was an easy fix with limiting the amount of children that were in the center at a time, and then also just having the vacuum out. That way, once we were done, we could just vacuum up what was on the floor. And then another problem that I encountered was that not a lot of families brought in photos for my second provocation station. I still continue this provocation station with every child by simply just asking them if they've gone to a pumpkin patch or like what other activities that they've done in the fall. Um, but I would have loved to see more pictures and to see everybody have the experience that Caroline and some of my other children had. Um, Lastly, as the weather became colder, we were unable to go outside and complete some of our more provocation activities. And they had some hypotheses, but we couldn't bring those hypotheses from outside to inside. like raking leaves. We can't really rake leaves inside, like we can in our uh, little sensory bin, but not the full experience. Um, so the way I solved this problem was shifting some of those activities by placing materials in our sensory bin. Um, and instead, we would like smell leaves and examine leaves with magnifying glasses instead of raking them. But I would have loved to have brought that activity to my children. I was honestly blown away by how my children's connections and investigations evolved over these past few weeks. This was my first ever time even hearing about provocations, and so I was very timid at first to introduce this strategy in this project, but I soon fell in love with this strategy, and I think it's a great way to introduce new topics or discover new ways to interact with materials that you may have already had on hand. What I gained the most from this was taking the time to simply observe my children and watch as they make their own connections. A few of these connections were not instant, and I had to stop myself from interrupting my children's natural ability to make connections. So with time, I watched and observed and documented how my children's play evolved and how they viewed the season of fall differently. For example, one of my children, he had asked where or how the leaves came to the playground, and instead of answering it for him, I let him create his own investigation. And it took days, but eventually he said they came from those trees, as he pointed to the trees that no longer had leaves on them. And that was one of my biggest lessons for me personally, was that there's no time limit on inquiry. And my last major takeaway from this project was that it's okay if provocations evolve into something different from your original intentions. Provocations are meant to be more children driven, so let your children take the lead. After completing my observations and the overall environments project, I'm left with a few lingering questions, and a couple of them are: how might the children's engagement in the provocation activity changed if more parents contributed fall photos? What other materials could spark memories relating to fall experiences? And lastly, could this provocation be adapted to introduce all seasons, such as winter, spring, and summer? So, like, what does winter smell like? What does spring smell like? And what does summer smell like? I'm curious to know if those would be as successful as fall, because fall has so many smells associated with it. But winter, I don't know. It's just something I'm curious about. Does winter have smells? um, so there's also a few additional invitations I would like to try, such as creating leaf piles outside and then putting rakes and seeing if my children make the connection to rake their own leaf piles or what they do there. I'm just really curious to see what they would do. Another idea is setting out hay barrels and observing connections children might have had with bringing in real hay barrels from a farm. Similar to other fall experiences of like hay barrels at apple orchards and tractor rides and pumpkin patches. I also wanted to incorporate sweaters and scarves somehow, because for me that's a big smell for uh, fall or associating with fall, and perhaps adding them into the dramatic play area, um, and just seeing what my children do with them. And I also was wanting to like take my children to a pumpkin patch or apple orchard. Unfortunately, it got way too cold too fast, and all of those places are closed now. But I can shift the project to focus more on the signs of winter if I really wanted to, especially since my children have already started showing curiosity about this change. With the recent changes to our playground that we could build on with this ice coming to be. But I'm really, truly excited to have had this opportunity to explore environments and see how the environment plays as the third teacher. And as educators, we can make a profound impact on children's development this way. By creating meaningful provocations, we encourage children to explore, question, and hypothesize their own theories about the world around them. And lastly, here are my references that I used.